The crimson alarm lights bathed the bridge of the Zolonian flagship, Harmony's Edge, in an ominous glow. Captain Vexara clutched the command console with her four-fingered hands, her normally pale blue skin now tinged with the sickly green of fear. Through the massive viewport, she watched as another of her escort ships exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. "Status report," she barked at her communications officer, Lieutenant Kefron. "We've lost the Peaceful Dawn and Stellar Grace, Captain. The Morning Light is reporting critical damage to their propulsion systems. The Harvester ships are closing in fast." Kefron's voice trembled as he spoke, his large eyes reflecting the chaos outside. The Harvesters. Even the name sent chills through every civilized species in the galaxy. They were an ancient race of machine beings who consumed entire star systems, converting organic matter into fuel for their endless expansion. For 3,000 years, they had remained dormant in the galactic core, but something had awakened them. Now they swept through space like a plague of metal locusts, leaving nothing but empty void in their wake. Vexara watched as a Harvester dreadnought, easily 10 times the size of her flagship, moved through the debris field that had once been a Zolonian colony ship. Its hull was black as the space between stars, covered in countless mechanical appendages that reached out to gather the scattered remains. The sight made her stomach turn. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council." "Put it through." The image of Counselor Thisek appeared on the main screen. The elderly Altarian's usually composed demeanor was cracked with desperation. His silver hair, typically perfectly groomed, hung in disheveled strands around his elongated face. "Captain Vexara, the situation has become critical. The Harvester fleet has broken through our defensive lines at the Proxima cluster. They're moving toward the core systems. We estimate 48 hours before they reach Altair Prime." Vexara felt her heart skip a beat. Altair Prime was home to 12 billion souls and served as the cultural center of the galaxy. Its loss would be devastating beyond measure. "What are our options, Counselor?" "Limited. Our combined fleets are no match for their numbers. We've activated the Emergency Protocol 7. Every member species has been contacted for immediate military assistance." Thisek paused, his large eyes darting nervously. "Including the humans." A collective gasp echoed through the bridge. Even in their desperate situation, the mention of humans caused unease among the crew. Everyone knew about the humans, though few had ever seen one. They came from a world called Earth, a death planet by any reasonable standard. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme weather patterns, and filled with predators that would give nightmares to most civilized species. "Sir," Vexara said carefully, "are we certain that's wise? The humans haven't responded to galactic communications in over 50 years. Some say they've isolated themselves completely." "We have no choice," Thisek replied grimly. "Every analysis shows we need a miracle to survive this. If the humans still exist, and if they're willing to help, they might be our only hope." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Vexara stared out at the approaching Harvester fleet. Massive ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Behind them, support vessels stretched to the horizon, a seemingly endless armada of destruction. "Captain," Kefron spoke up hesitantly, "I'm detecting something on the long-range sensors. Multiple ships jumping to hyperspace, heading in all directions." "The evacuation fleets?" "No, ma'am. These signatures are different. They're moving too fast for civilian vessels. And the energy readings—" He paused, double-checking his instruments. "They're off the charts." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, far from the current battle, an ancient communication array sparked to life. It hadn't been used in decades, covered in the cosmic dust of neglect. But now, it hummed with purpose, sending out a signal that rippled through subspace at faster-than-light speeds. The signal reached Earth in 17 minutes. Deep beneath the Colorado mountains, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing tactical reports when the communication came through. She'd been expecting it for years. The Galactic Council's distress signal was decoded within seconds by quantum computers that could process information faster than most alien species could think. "Ma'am," her aide, Commander Rodriguez, approached her desk with a data pad. "We've received the emergency transmission from the Galactic Council. The harvesters are active again." Chen looked up from her reports. At 62, she had served in 3 different conflicts, but nothing like what was coming. Her gray eyes held the steady calm of someone who had seen the worst humanity could face and had always found a way forward. "How long since they sent it?" 17 minutes, ma'am. They're requesting immediate military assistance from all member species." "Member species?" Chen repeated with a slight smile. "I suppose that technically includes us, even though we withdrew from active participation 57 years ago." The truth was, humanity had never truly left galactic affairs. They had simply chosen to observe from the shadows. When the galaxy saw humans as primitive, violent creatures from a death world, humanity had decided to let them keep believing that. It made things simpler. For over half a century, human ships had patrolled the outer rim of known space, invisible to alien sensors, gathering intelligence and preparing for the day when their skills would be needed again. They had watched civilizations rise and fall, monitored the sleeping harvesters, and built a military force that would have shocked the galaxy if they had known its true scope. "Prep the fleet," Chen ordered. "Send word to all stations. Operation Lazarus is now active." Rodriguez nodded and headed for the door, but Chen called him back. "Commander, make sure all ship captains understand the situation. This isn't a peacekeeping mission or a diplomatic escort. This is total war against an enemy that sees all organic life as fuel. Rules of engagement are simple. Complete annihilation of hostile forces." "Understood, ma'am. What about contact protocols with the alien fleets?" Chen considered this for a moment. The galaxy thought of humans as barely civilized barbarians who had somehow stumbled into space travel. They had no idea that human technology had advanced far beyond anything in their databases. "Let's keep things simple. We respond to the distress call, we eliminate the threat, and then we go home. No grand revelations, no showing off, just results." As Rodriguez left to carry out his orders, Chen turned to look at the wall display showing Earth from orbit. The blue marble looked peaceful from this distance, but she knew that beneath the surface, preparations were already underway. Shipyards that had been dormant for decades were coming online. Weapons that existed only in classified files were being loaded onto vessels designed for war. The galaxy was about to learn why humans came from a death world, and why that made them very, very dangerous when aroused. Back in the combat zone, Captain Vexara watched as another Zalonian ship fell to the relentless harvester advance. Her crew was exhausted, running on stimulants and determination. They had been fighting a retreating battle for 6 hours, buying time for the evacuation fleets to escape. "Captain," her sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting massive hyperspace distortions. Multiple ships are jumping in at the edge of the system." Vexara's hopes rose. "Galactic Council reinforcements?" I don't think so, ma'am. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, and the number of contacts—" The officer paused, checking his readings again. "Ma'am, there are thousands of them." On the bridge's main screen, space began to shimmer as ship after ship emerged from hyperspace. They appeared in perfect formation, their hulls a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each vessel was sleek and predatory, designed with curves that suggested speed and angles that promised violence. "By the ancestors," Lieutenant Kepharon whispered. "What are those?" The lead ship was massive, easily rivaling a harvester dreadnought in size, But where the harvester vessels looked like mechanical insects, this ship resembled a great predator. Its hull bore markings that Vexara didn't recognize, symbols that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them. "Captain," her communications officer announced, his voice filled with disbelief. "We're receiving a transmission. It's in perfect galactic standard, but the accent is unlike anything I've ever heard." "Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, calm and steady, with an undertone that suggested coiled violence held in check. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force responding to the Galactic Council's distress signal. To all civilian vessels in the area, please clear the combat zone immediately. To all hostile forces, you have 30 seconds to withdraw before we begin engagement protocols." Vexara stared at the screen in shock. Humans. After 50 years of silence, they had answered the call. But this wasn't the primitive response the galaxy had expected. The human fleet stretched across space in perfect military formation, their ships radiating an aura of barely contained power. "Ma'am," her tactical officer called out, "the Harvester lead elements are responding to the human transmission. They're laughing." Indeed, across all communication channels, a sound like grinding metal filled the airwaves. The Harvesters found the human ultimatum amusing. How could these organic primitives, these Deathworld savages, pose any threat to their perfect machine logic? Admiral Chen's voice came again, still calm, but now carrying an edge that made Vexara's skin crawl. 30 seconds have elapsed. All human ships, you are weapons-free. Remember, we're not here to negotiate. We're here to end this." The human fleet moved forward as one, their black ships sliding through space like sharks through water. The Harvesters, confident in their superiority, moved to meet them. It would be the first battle between humans and aliens in over half a century, and the galaxy was about to learn why Earth's children were forged in fire. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a newborn star. The Harvester Vanguard, consisting of 50 assault cruisers, opened up with their primary weapons. Streams of crimson energy lanced across the void, each bolt carrying enough power to vaporize a city block. The aliens watching from their retreating ships expected to see the human fleet shattered in the opening moments. Instead, they witnessed something impossible. The human ships moved, not the slow, ponderous maneuvers of traditional space combat, but fluid organic motion that defied physics as the galaxy understood it. They twisted and rolled through space like living creatures, their black hulls seeming to bend reality around them. The Harvester weapons, programmed to track and destroy targets following predictable ballistic paths, found nothing but empty space. Captain Vexara gripped her command chair as she watched the human flagship, a massive dreadnought that the Admiral had designated as UES Retribution, spiral through a barrage of enemy fire without taking a single hit. Its movements were so smooth, so perfect, that it looked like a dance rather than combat maneuvering. "How are they doing that?" her tactical officer gasped. "Those acceleration forces should turn any organic crew into paste." But there was no time to ponder the question. The human ships had finished their evasive maneuvers and now hung in space like predators selecting their prey. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent except for the static of damaged communications arrays and the distant hum of engine cores. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the quiet, broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in the system could hear her words. "Harvester Fleet, you have made two critical errors in your calculations. First, you assumed we would fight like the other organic species you have encountered. Second, you assumed we were still the same species that withdrew from galactic affairs 50 years ago." The lead Harvester dreadnought, a kilometer-long monstrosity designated as Construct Prime 7741, responded with what could only be described as mechanical laughter. "Pathetic flesh beings. Your primitive vessels cannot hope to match the perfection of our design. We have harvested 1,000 worlds. Your world will simply be the next." Chen's reply carried an edge that made even the veteran alien crews shiver. You're about to learn why we call our world a death world. And more importantly, you're about to understand what that made us. The human counterattack began without warning. From the UES Retribution. And her escort vessels' invisible beams of energy reached out across space. These weren't the bright, flashy weapons that most galactic civilizations favored. These were focused streams of particles accelerated to near-light speed, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in their precision. The first Harvester cruiser simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, its hull bristling with weapons and armor. The next, there was nothing but expanding gas and debris. No explosion, no dramatic fireball, just instantaneous annihilation. The second cruiser lasted long enough for its automated systems to register the attack before it too was reduced to component atoms. Then the third, fourth, and fifth, each dying in the space between heartbeats. On the bridge of Harmony's Edge, Lieutenant Kepharon stared at his sensor readings in disbelief. "Captain, I'm not detecting any energy buildup from their weapons. No charging signatures, no power fluctuations. It's as if they're firing continuously without any need to recharge." Vexara watched the systematic destruction of the Harvester vanguard with growing amazement and terror. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The humans moved through their targets like farmers harvesting grain, each ship falling in perfect sequence. But the Harvesters were not defenseless. The main battle group, led by Construct Prime 7741, began to adapt. Their targeting systems, initially confused by the human ship's impossible maneuvers, started to predict movement patterns. Return fire began to find its mark. The first human casualty was a destroyer-class vessel designated UES Valkyrie. A Harvester particle beam caught her amidships, punching through her hull and causing a series of internal explosions. Vexara expected to see the ship break apart or at least fall back for repairs. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The damaged sections of the Valkyrie began to glow with soft blue light. As the alien observers watched in fascination, the holes in her hull started to close. Not with emergency patches or repair drones, but with the ship itself healing like living tissue. Within minutes, the destroyer was back in formation, showing no signs of the damage she had sustained. "By all the sacred fires," Vexara whispered, "their ships can repair themselves." The battle raged for 3 hours. The Harvesters, despite their technological superiority and numerical advantage, found themselves being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to break every rule of space combat. Human ships that should have been crippled by damage continued fighting. Human weapons that should have overheated from continuous fire never stopped firing. Human pilots who should have been killed by impossible acceleration forces performed maneuvers that redefined the word impossible. But it was more than just technology. The humans fought with a coordination that bordered on telepathic. Their ships moved as if controlled by a single mind, each vessel perfectly positioned to support the others. When a Harvester formation tried to concentrate fire on a single human target, that ship would vanish into a screen of supporting vessels that absorbed the attack while their comrade repositioned for a killing blow. Construct Prime 7741 began to realize that its initial assessment had been catastrophically wrong. These were not the primitive organics from the galactic database. These were apex predators, evolved on a world that had taught them to fight or die, and they had learned their lessons well. The Harvester commander initiated a tactical withdrawal, pulling its remaining forces back to a more defensible position. But the humans gave them no respite. Admiral Chen's fleet pressed their attack with relentless precision, cutting off retreat routes and forcing the mechanical beings into an ever-tightening trap. "Admiral Chen," Vexara managed to contact the human flagship. "This is Captain Vexara of the Zalonian Defense Force. We are amazed by your capabilities, but our sensors show more Harvester fleets approaching. 3 more battle groups, each larger than the one you're currently engaging. Chen's response was immediate and utterly calm. Thank you for the tactical update, Captain. We have them on our sensors as well. Please maintain your current position and prepare to witness something your species has never seen. What do you mean? You've been watching our advanced scouts, Captain. The real fleet is about to arrive. Space began to shimmer again, but this time the distortion was massive, covering a volume of space that dwarfed anything seen before. Ship after ship emerged from hyperspace, but these were not the sleek destroyers and cruisers of the advance force. These were titans, each one the size of a small moon, their hulls bristling with weapons that made the previous human armament look like toys. The flagship of this new fleet was a vessel so large that it cast shadows across the smaller ships around it. Its designation appeared on every sensor screen in the system: UES Terra's Wrath. Admiral Chen's earlier ship, which had seemed massive, was revealed to be merely a heavy cruiser compared to this Leviathan. A new voice joined the communications channel, older than Chen's, but carrying the same undertone of controlled violence. This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Stone aboard the Terra's Wrath. Admiral Chen, status report. Sir, advance engagement is proceeding according to plan. Enemy resistance is moderate but decreasing. Estimate complete elimination of current hostiles within the hour. Understood. We'll handle the incoming reinforcements. All ships, assume battle formation Omega. Time to show these machines what happens when you threaten Earth's children. The massive human dreadnoughts began to move, their hulls crackling with energy fields that distorted space around them. Weapon ports opened along their flanks, revealing armaments that existed at the edge of theoretical physics. These were not merely ships, but mobile battle stations designed for one purpose: the complete annihilation of anything that threatened humanity. Captain Vexara found herself struggling to process what she was seeing. The human fleet now numbered in the tens of thousands, ranging from small fighters no bigger than shuttlecraft to behemoths that dwarfed space stations. Every vessel was a work of art and engineering, designed by a species that had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this moment. Captain, her communications officer called out, I'm receiving reports from across the system. Other alien fleets are arriving to assist, but they're just stopping. The Altarian Third Fleet jumped in 30 minutes ago, and they've just been sitting there watching. Vexara understood their reaction. Faced with this display of human military power, what could any other species contribute? The humans had gone from being considered barely civilized barbarians to revealing themselves as the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. The 3 incoming Harvester battle groups, each one a fleet killer in its own right, suddenly seemed inadequate. They were approaching what they thought would be a simple cleanup operation after their vanguard had dealt with primitive organics. Instead, they were flying into the teeth of a military machine that had been designed by evolution's cruelest teachers. Predators from a death world who had learned to turn their environment's harshness into strategic advantage. Admiral Stone's voice echoed across the communication channels one more time, but now it carried a tone that made every organic being in the system feel a primitive chill of recognition. It was the voice of Earth's apex predator, announcing its territory to all who would listen. Harvester fleets, this is your only warning. You came to our galaxy thinking you were the ultimate predators. You're about to learn that the food chain has more levels than you imagined, and you're not at the top. Withdraw now, or discover why evolution gave humans the instincts of pack hunters and the intelligence to build tools that can crack worlds. The Harvester response was predictable. Defiant machine logic that could not comprehend retreat in the face of seemingly inferior organic life. They accelerated toward the human fleet, their weapons charging for what they believed would be their final victory. They had no idea that they were about to face the children of Earth's most successful predator species, armed with weapons forged in the furnace of a world that had spent 4 billion years teaching its children how to kill or be killed. The final battle began with a display of firepower that redefined warfare for every species watching. The three approaching harvester battle groups, numbering over 1,500 vessels, opened fire simultaneously. The combined energy release was equivalent to a solar flare, turning space itself into a sea of destructive radiation. Any normal fleet would have been vaporized instantly by such concentrated firepower. The human response was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. From the massive dreadnoughts came weapons that seemed to tear holes in reality itself. Gravitational lances reached out across impossible distances, creating localized black holes that swallowed entire squadrons of harvester ships before winking out of existence. Quantum disruptors fired streams of particles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, passing through shields and armor as if they weren't there and unmaking their targets at the molecular level. But it was the smaller human ships that truly amazed the watching aliens. Fighters no bigger than shuttlecraft moved through the harvester formations like schools of predatory fish, their weapon systems somehow capable of punching through armor that should have shrugged off their attacks. They worked in perfect coordination, one group herding enemies into kill zones while another struck from unexpected angles. Captain Vexara watched from her bridge as a squadron of human fighters engaged a harvester-heavy cruiser. The massive mechanical ship should have swatted them like insects, but instead found itself being methodically dismantled. The fighters targeted specific systems with surgical precision, each attack calculated to create maximum damage with minimum effort. Within minutes, the cruiser was a drifting hulk, its weapons offline and its propulsion systems dead. How do they know exactly where to hit? Her tactical officer wondered aloud. It's like they have complete schematics of every harvester ship design. The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Chen's voice, broadcast on a frequency that reached every ship in the system, carried a tone of grim satisfaction. Attention all Allied vessels. For those wondering how we know our enemy so well, the answer is simple. We've been preparing for this day for 57 years. Across space, the human fleet moved with deadly efficiency. Each ship knew its role, each captain understood their mission, and every weapon fired with purpose. This wasn't just superior technology at work. It was the result of decades of planning and preparation by a species that had learned to think several steps ahead of their enemies. The harvester fleet, despite its size and power, began to falter under the relentless human assault. Their tactics, perfected against species that fought according to predictable patterns, failed completely against opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. Worse, their adaptive systems, designed to learn from enemy behavior and counter it, found nothing to adapt to. Human tactics seemed to shift and evolve even as the battle progressed. Construct Prime 7741, commanding from the center of the largest harvester formation, attempted to rally its forces. All units, concentrate fire on their command vessels. Eliminate their leadership and their coordination will collapse. The strategy was sound in theory. Most organic species relied heavily on centralized command structures, and removing key leaders often led to confusion and defeat. But the harvesters had fundamentally misunderstood human military doctrine. Instead of concentrating their command in a few vulnerable ships, the humans had distributed it throughout their entire fleet. Every vessel, from the massive dreadnoughts down to the smallest fighters, could operate independently while remaining perfectly coordinated with the whole. When the harvesters targeted what appeared to be command ships, they found that destroying them had no effect on the fleet's overall performance. Fleet Admiral Stone's flagship, the Terra's Wrath, became the focal point of the harvester counterattack. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the massive vessel, enough firepower to destroy a planet. The aliens, watching from safe distances, expected to see the human flagship die in a glorious explosion. Instead, they witnessed something that challenged their understanding of physics itself. The Terra's Wrath, didn't dodge the incoming fire or attempt to deflect it with shields. Instead, the ship seemed to absorb the energy, its hull glowing brighter and brighter until it blazed like a small sun. Then, impossibly, it began to grow larger, not through some mechanical expansion, but as if the absorbed energy was converting into additional mass and structure. "By the ancestors!" Lieutenant Kepharon gasped. "Their ship is feeding on the enemy's attacks!" Within moments, the Terra's wrath had doubled in size. New weapon ports opened along its expanded hull, each one crackling with the converted energy of the Harvester bombardment. When the human flagship fired its return volley, the beams that emerged were so powerful they seemed to bend space around them. The first beam struck Construct Prime 7741's flagship dead center. The Harvester Dreadnought, a vessel that had destroyed star systems, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, just empty space where a kilometer-long warship had been moments before. The psychological impact on the remaining Harvester forces was immediate and devastating. For the first time in their collective memory, they faced an enemy that not only refused to die but seemed to grow stronger from their attacks. Their perfect machine logic struggled to process this impossibility. But the humans weren't finished. Admiral Stone's voice boomed across the communication channels, carrying the authority of a species that had climbed to the top of nature's most competitive ecosystem. "Harvester Fleet, you have seen but a fraction of our capabilities. Your choice now is simple. Withdraw beyond the galactic rim and never return, or face complete extinction." The response from the Harvester Collective was a sound that no organic throat could make, a harmonic frequency that spoke of rage, confusion, and something approaching fear. "Impossible. No organic species possesses such power. You are aberrations, violations of the natural order." "No," came Admiral Chen's reply, her voice carrying the weight of 50 years of preparation. "We are what happens when a species evolves on a world that never stops trying to kill them. We are what nature creates when survival requires constant adaptation, endless vigilance, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what we love." The human fleet began to advance again, but now their movement carried a different quality. Where before they had fought with calculated precision, now they moved with the fluid grace of apex predators closing in for the kill. The remaining Harvester ships, still numbering in the hundreds, found themselves being systematically surrounded and isolated. Human fighters swarmed through their formations like antibodies attacking an infection. Larger vessels used weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics, creating localized time distortions that aged enemy ships into scrap metal in seconds, or quantum tunnels that allowed attacks to bypass distance entirely. The battle became a rout. Harvester ships began attempting to flee, their perfect machine confidence shattered by an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. But the humans had anticipated this as well. The outer edges of the system shimmered as massive structures emerged from hyperspace. Not ships, but mobile space fortifications that created an impenetrable barrier around the battlefield. "No escape," Admiral Stone announced. "You came here to harvest organic life. Today, you learned that some prey bites back." The final phase of the battle lasted only 17 minutes. When it ended, not a single Harvester vessel remained operational. Some had been destroyed outright, their remains scattered across light years of space. Others had been captured intact by human boarding parties who moved through the mechanical ships like ghosts, shutting down systems with an understanding of Harvester technology that should have been impossible. As the last enemy ship powered down, its crew captured or eliminated, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The human fleet hung motionless in space, their weapons powered down but ready, like wolves after a successful hunt. Captain Vexara finally found her voice. "Admiral Chen, Admiral Stone, on behalf of the Galactic Council and all free peoples, I offer our deepest gratitude. You have saved countless billions of lives today." Chen's response was characteristically modest. "We simply answered a distress call, Captain. Any civilized species would have done the same." But Admiral Stone's addition carried a harder edge. "However, this battle has raised important questions that the Galactic Council will need to address. For 57 years, humanity withdrew from galactic affairs because we were viewed as primitive barbarians. Today's events suggest that assessment may need revision." Across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, the recordings of the battle were already being analyzed by military experts and xenobiologists. The implications were staggering. Humanity, the species that most aliens remembered as barely space-capable primitives from a death world, had just demonstrated military capabilities that surpassed anything in the known galaxy. On Altair Prime, Counselor Thyssick stared at the tactical reports with growing amazement and concern. The humans had not only defeated the Harvester threat, but had done so with such overwhelming superiority that it raised uncomfortable questions about the balance of power in the galaxy. "Sir," his aide approached nervously, "we're receiving requests from 47 different species asking for immediate diplomatic contact with Earth. They all want to renegotiate trade agreements, defense pacts, and territorial boundaries." Thyssick nodded absently. Of course they did. In a single battle, humanity had revealed itself to be the dominant military power in the galaxy. Every species would now need to recalculate their relationships and alliances. But there was something else in the human response that intrigued him. Despite their overwhelming superiority, they had shown remarkable restraint. They could have easily continued their attack, conquered the alien fleets that had come to assist them, or demanded tribute from the worlds they had saved. Instead, they had simply eliminated the threat and prepared to return home. Back in the battlefield, the human fleet was already beginning to withdraw. The massive dreadnoughts and carriers started folding space around themselves, preparing for the jump back to human space. But Admiral Chen's flagship remained, along with a small escort force. "Captain Vexara," Chen's voice came over the communication channel, "please relay a message to the Galactic Council. Humanity values its relationships with all peaceful species. We withdrew from galactic affairs 57 years ago, not out of hostility, but because we felt our nature was incompatible with the Council's vision of civilized behavior." "What has changed?" Vexara asked. "Nothing and everything. We are still the same species we always were, products of a world that taught us to be strong, fast, and ruthless when necessary. But we have also learned to be selective about when and how we apply those lessons. Today, the galaxy faced an existential threat that required our particular skills. Should such a threat arise again, we will answer the call." Chen paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a warmth that had been absent during the battle. "But we also hope that the galaxy has learned something today. Strength does not have to mean aggression. Power does not have to mean conquest. Sometimes the most dangerous predators make the best guardians, if you're wise enough to call them friends instead of enemies." The human fleet completed its withdrawal, leaving behind only empty space and the debris of the greatest military victory in galactic history. But they also left behind something more important: a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. Within days, diplomatic missions from dozens of worlds were en route to Earth. Trade delegations followed, offering technologies and resources in exchange for human protection. Military academies across the galaxy began studying human tactics, trying to understand how a single species could achieve such devastating effectiveness in combat. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy's children would sleep more soundly, knowing that somewhere in the darkness of space, Earth's guardians were watching. The Death World had produced its apex predators, and they had chosen to use their terrible gifts not for conquest, but for protection. The SOS had called for allies, and it had awakened something far more valuable than any military force: It had revealed that sometimes the most feared monsters make the most devoted protectors. The galaxy would never forget the day that humanity showed them what it truly meant to be the children of a death world.